panelists, we have a great group of women to have this discussion with you. Our panelist is here to share their own personal experiences regarding infertility. So I ask that you sit back, you take notes, because there are going to be a lot of nuggets that's going to be presented and given to you, and enjoy the conversation. Again, thank you and welcome to the Grand Rapids Alumni Chapter's event. Now I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing our host for today. And our host is Soror Vanessa Greene. You may know her as Vanessa Greene, but I know her as Soror Vanessa Greene. She is currently the CEO of the Grand Rapids African American Health Institute, GRAC, responsible for identifying and eliminating barriers to health care for African Americans and other marginalized groups. This work is centered around 4 pillars of care: community, advocacy, research, and education. Vanessa recently started a health education and equity series as is leading efforts to keep communities of color informed on issues of health equity, COVID, and vaccines. She also established a 17-member advisory advocacy council from our career and professional sectors to support the efforts of GRAC in addressing the social determinants of health and achieving great health outcomes for the African American community and our marginalized people. Prior to joining GRAC, Vanessa was the Associate Dean of Students, Director of the Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and an adjunct faculty at Hope Community for over 16 years. She was responsible for the leadership and strategic vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as guiding the campus and fostering an environment and campus culture that allowed everyone to flourish. She also worked in the continuing education division at Grand Valley State University approximately 8 years. She was responsible for supporting adult learning for admissions to graduation. Vanessa has served on numerous boards and committees and received numerous awards and recognition for her work and impact. Her most recent award was the Sankofa Black Faculty Excellence Award. She is married to her college sweetheart for over 35 years and has 2 wonderful daughters. Grand Rapids alumni, Grand Rapids community, let me bring Vanessa to the stage. Vanessa.
Well, thank you, Madam President of the Grand Rapids Alumni Chapter. I am delighted and honored to be here serving as the host of this event this evening. And I'd like to start by, again, thanking our fabulous president of the Grand Rapids Alumni Chapter, Ms. Mia Gutridge, for her leadership in our chapter, her wonderful dynamic leadership in our chapter. I'd also like to thank all the program planners for this event, and of course the panelists, but most importantly, you, the audience, for joining us in this very important conversation about infertility. And just to give you an overview of why the committee chose this particular topic is that there is a long-held belief and stereotype that women of color are more fertile than white women. However, studies show that we are 2 times more likely than white women to experience infertility, but then 50% less likely to seek treatment or help. And nearly all Black women who experience infertility suffer in silence, which is why today's conversation is so important. We're here to change that narrative. And as you may know, March of Dimes leads the fight for the health of all mothers and babies. And we believe that every baby deserves the best possible start but unfortunately, not all babies get one. For over 80 years, March of Dimes has helped millions of babies survive and thrive. Now we're here today building on that legacy to level the playing field of moms and babies, no matter their age, socioeconomic status, or their race. So our theme is very befitting, empowering stories of infertility to motherhood by our 4 dynamic panelists. And I'm going to introduce the panelists, and I'm going to start with Ashley Williams. And Ashley currently resides locally here in Caledonia, Michigan. She was born in Maryland and raised in Florida. She holds a bachelor's degree from Bethune-Cookman University in Business Administration and has 1 class remaining to complete her master's degree. Ashley works for Farmers Insurance as a marketing consultant and enjoys working with her clients and making a footprint in the marketplace. She's a proud mother, daughter, sister, and member of the Grand Rapids chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Next, we have Myesha Melving-Gholston. Myesha is a native of Los Angeles, California. She is an athletic academic advisor for Grand Valley State University. She obtained her Bachelor of Science degree from California State Polytechnic University at Pomona and a Master of Education from National University in La Jolla, California. Myesha is a proud mother of Jack and Jill and a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, where she serves as the primary advisor for Lambda Pi chapter. Myesha is married to Pastor Willie Gholston and is the First Lady of First Community AME Church. She is also the proud mother of an amazing 13-year-old son, Aaron Gholston III. And next we have Dr. Cheryl Wolf. Dr. Wolf is board certified in OB/GYN and has been practicing medicine for over 20 years. In her current role as Vice President for Women's Health at Spectrum Hospital, she is working to ensure the highest quality services for women rendered across the Spectrum Health system. In her previous role, Dr. Wolf served as the Vice President of Equity and Strategic Initiatives and Director of Ambulatory Services in the Department of OB/GYN at Rush University Medical Center. She also led her own private practice and served as department chair at Mercy Hospital and Medical Center in Chicago. Dr. Wolf has held several positions on boards and committees at the state, local, and hospital level. She was appointed by the governor to serve on the Illinois Hospital Licensing Board and was selected to serve on the Illinois Task Force on Infant Maternal Mortality and Morbidity. She has been on television, radio, and various forms of social and print media, promoting women's health and awareness in the African American community. She is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Last but not least, we have Kinetra Washington. Kinetra is a native of Arkansas, where she currently resides with her husband and 6-year-old fraternal twins. Kinetra has over 17 years of experience in sales and business development for the higher education sector. She currently works for Pierson, PTE Academic, headquartered in London, where she serves as a client relations leader supporting 14 states in the United States. She is also a licensed realtor and sells real estate in her spare time, as well as to support her family-owned construction company. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Southern Arkansas University, as well as graduate coursework from the University of Phoenix. Kinetra is a member of the beloved Central Arkansas Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta and Greater Little Rock Chapter of Jack and Jill. She is an active member of her beloved church, Fellowship Bible Church. She is an ardent supporter of the ability to have she is an ardent supporter of the ability to have a family through means most fitting for the desirable couple. Along with two other members of this panel, much of Kinetra's passion regarding infertility comes from her own experiences as a patient and her personal 5-year journey to expand her family. Kinetra believes that the inherent desire for family is among many and thankful that there are options in our society to make that a reality. So now that we have introduced these phenomenal women, we are going to start with our conversation, and I am going to ask each of you to begin by taking a few minutes to share your personal story about infertility. And we will start with Ashley.
Hi, thanks. Good evening, everyone. So just a little bit about me. So I'm honored to be on this panel to share my story and difficulties that I've had and that I still do have with infertility. I was diagnosed with PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we, have our conversation here tonight. But I was diagnosed with PCOS at a very young age. And placed on birth control, gained weight, blotchy skin. So we're talking middle school age. So I was very young. And I was told that I was never going to be able to have kids. And if I did want to have kids, then I would, be placed on some medication if that medication worked. So 2018, I gave birth to a beautiful little girl by the name of Dallas. But 26, 27 years old, I wasn't running to the doctor to get medication to get pregnant. I'm still trying to enjoy my life and travel and, just live my 20s. But that just to tell you that, to be encouraged, whatever, the doctors may tell you, that I serve a God that's bigger than, any doctor's know or any doctor's, diagnosis. So that's a little bit about me with polycystic ovaries.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing. Next, we'll have Myesha.
So I want to say just as Ashley, thank you to the committee for simply having this discussion. I think it's so important and crucial that we talk about it, right? Because when you get married, everyone's like, oh, we having a baby, when's the baby? Everybody just starts off with that, when's the baby? So my journey, I never really thought that I would ever have issues getting pregnant. Never crossed my mind. I just thought when I'm ready, I'm ready. I'm going to do what I do, right? And it would just happen. And it wasn't, it was like, I felt that when we wanted to start our family, we would just simply do that. And just prior to getting married and just growing up, I've always had heavy cycles, right? I always had heavy cycles, heavy menstruals, and I just thought it was normal. So I went to the doctor in my early 20s, and the doctor said I had chocolate cysts, and they did a laparoscopy surgery and removed the cyst, and everything was fine. Again, I'm not married, not thinking about having kids, none of that. But then I got married. Again, you want to get married, have your ups and downs in your relationship, right? Everybody says don't start off having children. So we waited. When we started to have conversations about wanting to have our family or start our family, we went to the doctor, began having discussions, and the doctor said, oh, just go home, relax, don't put too much pressure on yourself, all that kind of stuff. And a month became more months and more months, and then months became years. And then it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I have to be honest, I felt discouraged, but it's really hard, especially when you see people around you beginning to start their families and you are not able to start yours, right? You're trying, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then you see people that don't want children or having children. So that becomes difficult, and all that weighs on you. I had an awesome doctor, but I also want to say that in my early days, doctors don't talk to you about, when you want to start having a family. That's not a discussion that was had with me at all. So my husband and I went to my doctor, and the doctor said, well, you've been trying for over a year. We've done different things and tried different methods. I can't get you pregnant. You won't be able to get pregnant. You're going to have to go see somebody else. And so he sent me to Dr. Jarrett in Indiana. And Dr. Jarrett was great. We went to our first or second visit or so because we had a great conversation. And he said, he did his examination, and he said, Myesha, if you allow me to take your tubes, I'll get you pregnant. I can get you pregnant. Now, mind you, I didn't know anything about any other way to have a baby. You don't really think about those things. They don't have those kinds of conversations. And so I was like, take my tubes. And I said, okay. We talked more about it, the process. Then we talked about the cost of IVF, in vitro fertilization. And that in itself is a shock, right? They don't tell you about that. But I have to tell you that I trusted God. My husband and I prayed for a healthy child. We didn't say how we wanted to get it or anything. We just prayed to be parents. And they took my tubes. We talked to our parents, our family, and from savings and family and all that, it was about $14,000 that we came up with to have over that. Let me just say that was the initial. And I must say that Aaron, we have one son, first cycle, first attempt. We got 4 eggs. One made it, and it was Aaron. And I know when I first moved to Grand Rapids, and I've always said this, he's perfect. Now, everybody knows a 13-year-old is not perfect, or a 2-year-old is not perfect. But Aaron is perfect because he is who we prayed for. And I truly believe in the story of Hannah because she prayed for her child, and we prayed for Aaron. And I am so thankful and so blessed that I went into the situation settled, if that makes sense. So God, however you do it, I'm going to be somebody's mommy. And it was not until recent, I would say within the last 5 years when I've moved to Grand Rapids, that I've talked to different women about my story and about my journey. And it has been a true blessing. It has allowed me to just know that I'm not alone. And there's so many women out there. And so I'm excited to have this discussion on the panel. I am excited to answer any questions because people don't tell you about the shots that you have to take when you do IVF. They don't tell you about the bloatedness when you have IVF. They don't tell you any of those things. So any questions, I'm always honest about it. So any questions you have, I'm excited to go on this journey with you all. So panel, committee, I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Sorry, I was muted. But thank you so much, Myesha. I think that like so many women, I know that when I was ready to have a child or when I got married, I never thought about having any infertility issues or not getting pregnant being an issue at all. And then when I started researching and seeing how common it was within the African-American community of just struggling with these issues, I was just shocked and just kind of heartbroken by it. But there's so many resources, and I'm so glad again that you guys are here to share those, and to share your experiences. So next I'm going to ask Kinetra to speak and to share your story, and then we'll move to Cheryl. Dr.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sora Vanessa, for the introduction, and thank you to Grand Rapids chapter, alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority for just giving us a space to be able to share these very personal stories, but are much needed. So my journey started when I was about 23. I didn't realize it at the time that that was the beginning of my journey, but it was. I had a fibroid tumor that was so massive that they had to, I had to have it removed along with one ovary and one tube. So fast forward about 10 years after my husband and I had been married about a year, we decided to start trying. And so several months went by and nothing happened. And we were doing the right things, but nothing happened. And so we decided to go ahead and get an evaluation. We thought that at this point, I'm 33, 34, and he's a couple of years older. Maybe we should just get evaluated. So we went to our doctor, and sure enough, those feisty fibroids had returned. So I had to have yet another surgery, which was very frightening because, again, I have one tube and one ovary left. And so I'm hoping that the surgery is successful and they can leave, you know, those things intact. The surgery went well. We didn't have any complications. And during my road to recovery, I can remember going to see the doctor and getting a checkup. He said, Kinetra, I think we have some blockage in your fallopian tube. And I'm thinking, this cannot be, you know, what does this mean? And so they were able to clear the blockage, thank God. And within a month and a half, close to 2 months, we had a positive pregnancy test. So we were so excited and thankful because we knew that, you know, because of our age, we needed to do it. We felt like this needed to happen now. So we were pregnant, and I absolutely loved being pregnant. And after about 20 weeks, I was about 20 weeks pregnant when I went to see my doctor, and I had an elevated blood pressure reading. And so I've always had white coat syndrome. So I thought, I'm just nervous. And that's all it is. And I'm hoping they can get this under control. And so I went back again. I had elevated blood pressure readings over and over again. And they checked for protein in my urine. And come to find out, there was quite a significant amount of protein in my urine. And she said to me, I can't believe that this is what it is, but we need to make sure you're not experiencing preeclampsia. She said, typically it happens later on in your pregnancy, but this is pretty early. And so they monitored my pregnancy, and I went on bed rest for a couple weeks. And then, of course, they had to admit me to the hospital. So during that time, I guess about at 24 weeks, and just to kind of go back, so I had protein in my urine. They discovered that at about 20 weeks. So by 24 weeks, we lost our first baby together, Parker. She just was not healthy and was experiencing intrauterine growth restrictions. So she wasn't growing properly. So that was just very devastating for my husband and I. I just couldn't believe it was happening. Again, I have so many factors against me at this point. And so I'm just not sure, you know, where this is going to lead us. So after having to deliver her, we decided that we would take some time. And then because of our faith and because we were committed to expanding our family, we decided we aren't giving up. We're going to keep going. And if this is meant to happen, it will happen, but we're not giving up at this point. And so although adoption was a very viable option for us, we wanted to first try to get our own biological children. And so that's when we started our surrogacy journey that we knew absolutely nothing about. But I don't know, he and I, we always say we can handle anything together. But we started the surrogacy journey and found a godsend of a surrogate. Of course, there were many steps in between deciding to get a surrogate and finding the right surrogate. So she became pregnant. She got a positive pregnancy test. I was able to transfer 2 embryos, and they both were successful. And then one split. So we had triplets at first, but then one vanished after about a week. And pretty much the rest is history. She delivered our healthy twins about a month early, and that's it. I mean, now we have 6-year-old twins, Derek and Demi, and are just so thankful for the experience. And I always say, I mean, this was supposed to happen. I mean, it was already written, and that was just a journey that we had to take together. And so I say to anyone that is watching or listening, there are so many different paths to being a mom or being a parent. And if it's something that you really want, continue to try, because it can either happen for you, or you can decide that you don't want to, that your journey is over. It's certainly up to you. So I say, just don't give up and utilize all of your resources. So that's my journey, my infertility journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Wolf?
Thank you. I also want to just echo my joy of being a part of this panel. And I have to say, my stories from my patients are so similar to the stories that the panel has so graciously shared. And it is a gift to have them share these stories because you don't get a chance to hear that. And they have put their hearts out and laid things out to bear to help other people. And I think one of the issues that we see in the African-American community especially is this bravado that African-American women have, that there's no reason why I can't get pregnant. The show must go on. I don't have to share this with anyone. Someone may make some comments about me. It's my fault. I've shared earlier with this panel that it would break my heart when patients would come in with their partners and the partners would say, oh, what's wrong with you? You can't have a baby. You can't give me a child. And what a burden that you would have to carry to say it's all my fault. And it's not. We've heard stories today regarding chocolate cyst that's very consistent with endometriosis. That was traditionally thought, and I was taught this when I was going through medical school, that this was a white person's disease. This was a white woman's disease. Black women didn't get endometriosis. Black women could have lots of babies. And this was not, I wasn't in school that long ago, that fibroids really didn't keep you from getting pregnant, that was not an issue. And that prior surgeries didn't keep you from getting pregnant, that PCOS, it may keep you from getting pregnant, but if you just lose a little weight, you'll be fine. All of these myths that went through, and these were things that physicians and other physicians actually said to patients. It's hurtful and it's demeaning sometimes. And fortunately, we have a lot more data, a lot more information that we're able to share. And we know that patients, that this does impact our patients. And one of the things that I like to tell my patients is, let's get a plan. You're 25 years old. You may not be thinking about having children now, but if that is in your future, then let's start thinking about it now, because you may have fibroids that may need to be removed. You may have a history of endometriosis. You may have a history of a sexually transmitted disease that has blocked your tubes. There are processes now, or even 10 years ago, that were not available. But now there are processes done through an MRI where you can actually, what we call recannulize or open up the tubes. So there are a lot of things out there, but I hope that these conversations that we're having this evening will empower the viewers to take charge of their health, to be proactive. And you're a partner with your healthcare provider. You're not going in there combative saying, I read on Google, because all of us hate Dr. Google. But you have done your research and you want to be a partner with your healthcare provider to get you where you need to be regarding your fertility goals. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's actually a really good segue into our next question. And I know that I have two daughters, and one's 27, one's 32, and nieces, and it's 40. And one common concern is, what factor does age have in infertility issues, as well as just general health. So what role does health and age have in infertility? And Dr. Wolf, if you would like to begin, that would be great.
Sure. And I think there are a lot of things. I tell my patients, let's get your body baby ready, right? And so you have told me that you want to have a child, so now let's get your body baby ready. And so how do we do that? Do you have a history of diabetes? Are you diabetic? Do you have hypertension? Do you have a history of family history of hypertension? Have you had any sexually transmitted diseases? Do you have any irregularities in your menstrual cycles? There are a lot of things that we can do. One of the things that we see in the African American community more than we see in other communities is this history of, or personal history of, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. Food is delicious. And so sometimes we just need to, if we're getting our body baby ready, how do we do that? It doesn't mean I want you to lose, be model thin, but let's get you on that health track. Let's examine your food. What type of diet do you have? What type of exercise plan do you have? So let's start there. Let's do a really good family history. Let's do a genetic history of your family. And this doesn't mean taking the genetic test that is offered by Ancestry.com. This is, do you have a history of Down syndrome? Do you have a family history of Down syndrome or spina bifida or cystic fibrosis? Those are a lot of things that you can do. Ask those questions of your family members. Ask those questions of your partner. I'm just really amazed. Sometimes patients have no idea of the family history of their significant other. It's like, that's very important. And then infertility can happen in someone who's 25, who's 30. So that's why you need to start listening and listening to your body and paying attention and sharing and making that plan with your healthcare provider. But unfortunately, as we get older, and I share this with my patients, I said, you can lose weight when you're 90, but you can't have a baby. So as we're growing, as we're making things happen with our career, making things happen in other areas with our volunteer works and things like that. If you want to have a child, let's make that a priority too. Really at the age of 40, your chances of getting pregnant spontaneously really significantly decrease. And some centers actually see it less than 5%. And as you get older, you're also increased risk for having babies with Down syndrome or other chromosomal abnormalities. So you have to keep that in mind. Chances are, if you get pregnant at age 45 spontaneously, will you have a baby with Down syndrome? Probably not, but the risks are higher. So you just need to think about those things. And it's not to be discouraging, but it gives you the opportunity, it arms you with that information as you're moving forward and making your journey as you're moving towards fertility.
That's great. And I won't ask everybody to chime in on that question, but Kinetra, would you like to chime in? And I'd also be interested in, did you know about your medical history in your early 20s or when you were younger? At what point did you start understanding some of the health concerns that you faced?
So yes, so I knew my family history, medical family history. I did develop high blood pressure in my 20s, actually, late 20s. And I can also recall my husband, before we were married, when we talked about, which I think is very important if you're considering getting married, talking about starting a family. But we talked about, the health issues that he had or his family had and that we had. I remember us going in to get tested for, I think it was beta thalassemia trait. I don't know, the doctor might be able to shed some light on that. But so I was very aware of that. But starting out early, we really didn't have conversations around reproductive health. I mean, it's you don't get pregnant, you know. You go to school, you fall in love, you get married, you have a baby. And so I think that's pretty much in a nutshell how it was for me. So I was aware of the medical history of both my family and my husband's family. And age, of course, does play a factor. I remember my fertility doctor drawing this dreaded diagram, and I can visualize it like it was yesterday, saying, okay, you're this age, and then by this age, the possibility of you having some healthy eggs is going to diminish by this much. And that's just heart-wrenching, you know. So it certainly does play a factor. I think we were 38 when I was 38 when I went through the IVF cycle in order to transfer the embryos to our surrogate. So they were able to retrieve 7 eggs from me, and only 2 eggs were healthy enough to use. So that just kind of gives you an idea. So
Wow.
it does play a part.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So I'm going to move to the next question, and I'll start with Myesha. Myesha, studies show that infertility affects Black men and women in larger percentages than it does like Caucasian population. And also, in general, the African-American community delays seeking treatment. And I'm just curious, based upon your experience, what you feel contributes to that.
What contributes to us not seeking treatment?
Right.
There's so many factors: shame, and embarrassment, fear of, well, my mom did it or so and so did it. Why can't I? And then not having someone to talk to about it. I also think that it's important to know that infertility is not just in a female. The male could also have it. And so with me, we both had issues, right? And so we were talking the other day when we said that a woman would go somewhere else and have a kid so she wouldn't be killed by the head. But it's a lot of, we don't have the conversations, you know. We don't talk about infertility. We don't talk about planning for your family. We just feel like, sort of Kinetra said, it's going to happen. Like after this, then this. We have our timeline, right? We have a plan, and God always has something different for us. And so that's why it's not talked about. And then let's talk about the money. I cannot stress enough. And when you're in certain states, I was in the state of Indiana where it's not covered. Insurance does not cover these costs. And that's the money. I mean, I don't know who has money like that just sitting around, right? And so to have to pay for all of those things with no guarantee, let's say that too. There is no guarantee after you've put down $14,000, $15,000, $20,000. There's no guarantee that a baby will come at the end. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I feel like, you know, we just need to start having these conversations, and we need to start within our communities, not shaming women. And maybe we could start saying things, are you guys going to start growing your family? Or instead of saying, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to start having kids? Say, how are you going to grow your family? I don't know. Maybe it sounds better to me. Maybe it's not so shameful, I guess, or so, I don't know the word, but that's my.
Yeah. Thank you. There are so many things that's like a taboo in our community, and I just hope that this conversation leads to other conversations about other areas that our community needs to be talking about. And yeah, so, you know, hopefully your courage and your vulnerability and your authenticity and the way that you are sharing will, you know, just really open up just change the narrative and open up a platform for our community to understand the need and the importance of having conversations and just being able to support people and to provide share these experiences and resources. And, for example, like one state may not provide financial resources, but then there may be other alternatives that someone else have experienced that they can share, right? Even from that financial standpoint. So I'm just curious, from the rest of the panel, are there financial resources that you may be aware of that you may have received that type of support in your experience or heard of others who have received financial resources? Or what financial resources are you aware that are available? Anyone can speak to that who may have experience or awareness of those resources.
Well, I'll go. So I have PCOS, and so I guess my story is I never had to, I guess, have a conversation about any more in depth than, a type of medication. So I guess depending on the condition that an individual has, or, how they can easily treat it, I would definitely say, talk to your doctor. Maybe there's a cheaper route, such as, I think one of the medications I know is Clomid or something. That's one of the popular ones, but definitely reach out to your doctor and, see if there's a different, like a medication that you can try before, dig deep into, IVF or, surrogacy and different things like that. So I would say in my case, it was just more so medication.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley.
For Vanessa, if I could add to that as well. Unfortunately, we didn't have any financial support. We definitely needed it, but because it was such a big undertaking with all of it, IVF and then surrogacy in itself. But one thing that I've discovered is a lot of insurance companies, and I understand some states cover infertility, but even those that appear to not cover it, if you just really read the small print, get on the phone and call them, because they may say, we don't cover infertility, but then they may cover portions of it. They may cover a doctor's visit. They may cover part of the medications. They may cover a cycle, so I think don't just automatically assume that you don't have any support through your insurance carrier, to dig a little bit deeper. And then also there are a lot of resources now. And again, I wish I had dug deeper back when we were going through this. But, I always say resolve.org is a really great resource. fertilityiq.org is a great resource. But there's 2 Black women that have started foundations that provide grants and scholarships for IVF or just, different levels and layers of addressing your infertility issues. So I know we'll get that information out to the audience, but just don't give up. Don't just say, I can't afford it. How are we going to pay for it? Because there might be some options that will work for you.
That's great. Thank you, Kinetra. Dr. Wolf, you wanted to add?
Sure, I was going to add to that too. I know that there will be, I put in a couple of websites and I can't remember them offhand, but that actually offer that help for women. And one of those was the 2 Black women who started this foundation, and they've given out thousands of dollars in grants to support infertility. I love the fact that, that we've mentioned already that you should contact your insurance company. And also look at infertility centers. They have packages. We just don't hear about it. You just assume, oh, my insurance doesn't cover it, so no, that's it, I'm done. We'll have, what will we do? Do that deep dive. We do that deep dive for so many other things that we do in our lives, from restaurants to grocery stores to automobiles and everything else. Do that deep dive for this that matters so much. Call those fertility centers and say, hey, you know what? I have $15,000 saved up. What can I get? And I want the plan where I If I don't conceive after 3 cycles, then I want my money back. Partially, I want to get some of my money back. And you'd be surprised that they will do that, because they do that a lot for their Caucasian clients. Don't assume that they have all the money too, because that's not true. These plans exist, and just be very proactive and say, this is what we have, this is what we like, what can you do, how can you work with me? There may be some insurance companies that don't, depending on the company, the organization that you work with, may not provide any infertility benefits. I found Michigan is there's a big difference in the benefits for women's health in Michigan than there are in Illinois, which is where I spent most of my healthcare career in. But still, those opportunities are there. Just be very passionate about it and go for it.
So, thank you. That's very helpful information. And some of the questions that we had prepared, I believe that you guys have answered several of them in your introduction. But let me just ask one question, and then I'm going to go to a couple of questions from the audience. But this question is, what advice would you give to women and couples facing infertility issues? And when should women seek treatment, and what are some treatment options? And you guys have answered that question to some extent, but if there are other information that you would like to add to that, then yeah, that would be great.
I can add to that, and I know others will have some more input too, but I think the key is not to wait years and years. Really, the true definition of infertility for a woman under age 35 would be 1 year. I've seen patients say, oh, we've been trying for 4 years, and oh, it's the timing, it's this, it's that. I'm like, no, you've been having sex together and you haven't had a baby in 4 years, you meet the definition of infertility. And so don't fool yourself. It kind of goes back, I think, to what one of the panelists said is, oh, it's not us, it's not me, it's something, it's somebody. And so how can we, let's get you help. Over age 35, really after 6 months. So don't let those windows close, because once they completely close, they don't open. And so if you have questions, that's when you that's when you develop that trusted partnership with your healthcare provider. Hey, I'm looking to have a baby. We're looking to have a baby in the next year. What are my next steps? What should we do? And those are, we do those. Those are called preconception consultations or fertility consultations. And your healthcare provider will definitely do that. Women's health, and even your primary care doctor may offer some words of advice. So those would be my suggestions.
Yeah. So essentially, even if you're not married, and if you're not planning to have a child right away, but you desire to have a child in the future, whether you're married or not, or whether you're planning to have it within like the next year, then women should be having those conversations with their doctors.
Yes.
And some kind of a plan for when they are ready to have a child.
Exactly. I could not have said it better myself.
Yeah, I mean, but these are things that we don't think about, and as we're having this conversation, I just keep thinking that I want to be a grandmother, and my daughters are like, oh, well, we're not ready yet, or I may be ready in 5 years to 6 years, and one's married, one's not. And so this conversation is extremely helpful, to me, as I can kind of go back to them and say, well, even though you're not ready now, you need to definitely be having these conversations with your doctor. So yeah, so thank you guys.
Say, use the words reproductive goals. My reproductive goals are this. Use those words when you talk to your healthcare provider, when you make that appointment, and you say, I want to discuss my reproductive goals. And then if you're, don't let someone say, oh, you have plenty of time, you're young.
Right.
Okay, great. Maybe I don't see myself getting married until I'm 40. Well, I would like to freeze my eggs now that I'm 28 or 30. So, don't let those windows close. There's nothing wrong with donor egg. There's nothing wrong with donor sperm. But if you feel like that may not be your road, then you want to plan ahead.
And it's interesting also because freezing eggs, it sounds so unnatural, again, because we've not normalized those types of conversations in our community. And so for some people, it will sound unnatural. So, so what words of advice could you give to, our community, to the audience, and just kind of rethinking and thinking differently about the way that we perceive things?
I would say bring it out of the darkness. This is the first step, to have these brave women come out and say, this is what happened to me. Share your stories, because you guys are not the only one. I can't tell you how many stories that my patients have shared with me where we have held hands and cried and just, for the loss, and not the loss of a pregnancy, but the loss of the opportunity. And so, open up, let's normalize this. This is the perfect opportunity. This is just so helpful, I think, to get the conversation started. And there's a lot of conversations that can break off from this. As we could talk for hours about the endometriosis impact, for hours about fibroids, for hours about PCOS, and how that negatively impacts us, or how the shame in our community, just because of women of color, where we're thought, you all are fertile. And it's not just us. Mm-hmm. It's, other people feel that, you all are fertile. It's like Black and Latinx communities. You all have a bunch of babies. Well, not only are we impacted by infertility because of our fibroid disease, and unfortunately, because of the higher prevalence of sexually transmitted diseases in our community, but we don't seek the help. Sometimes you wait too late. You're 40 years old and you have fibroid disease and you had a lot of questions. And now what can we do? And it may take a long time. You're 48 and you want to say, I want to start having my baby. And, as a physician, I will work with you. We will work with your goals, but let's not narrow the options. Let's keep the options as wide open as possible.
Dr. Wolf, you brought up a really good point. I think normalizing it. Let's talk about freezing eggs. Like, that's not a normal conversation that we have. And Sora Greene, you should talk to your daughters about just this. Like, okay, I know you're not married, or even if you're not married and you want to have a baby, let's still talk about that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to become a mother, however you become a mother, when you become a mother. And so if that is your reproductive goal, let's have conversations about that. We talk about the purse, we talk about our careers, we talk about the boo we want and all of that, but let's be real and honest and have those conversations, because in our community, we don't know about I know there's IVF, there's so many other options that are not talked about. And so we are just taught to lay down and have a baby, you know what I mean? And so when it doesn't happen, we need to just make the conversation be real. I have to be honest, my son, who's 13, knows about how he knows all ways, because God makes all things well. And I tell him that he's perfect. And so it's just, we just need to talk about it and not be embarrassed of it.
Yeah, I love that. I also love the fact that you called him perfect. I love that. So
He's perfect.
There are a couple of questions. This one is for anyone from the audience. Does lack of trust in the medical hospital systems play a role in Black women not seeking care treatment? So we've talked a lot about the fact that we don't seek treatment, or we delay seeking treatment. So what role does that distrust in the hospital medical system play in that? And did it play a role in either of you all in terms of when you decided to seek treatment?
I guess I'll take that question. First of all, I believe in self-advocacy and just not stopping until I get the answers that I need. And I think that's very important in this conversation and the goals that intended moms or parents have. But I can remember, although I had a great doctor, but I can remember after losing Parker, he said to me, "You just need to adopt." And so there was no conversation about the other many options that my husband and I had. And at the time, I was at the appointment, alone, and I can remember just falling to my knees as I was walking out, because I thought, this is the end. But then God said, no, it's not. So I think us not being in a position where we know what options that there are, I think a lot of the marketing is targeted to, unfortunately, a Caucasian demographic. Mm-hmm. And not so much do we see brown people being reflected in the marketing campaigns and, this family adopted, these beautiful children, or they did IVF, or decided to go with the surrogacy route. I just don't, and I could be wrong, but I just don't recall seeing, our brown community being reflected in those type of ads. So I think that will diminish the trust that you have for the healthcare system. And unless you are really a self-advocate, then you could just say, well, I guess maybe, I don't have any options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Would anyone else like to add to that?
I can add to that too. I think being an African-American woman in this healthcare system, the most important thing is to advocate for yourself, as Kinetra said. I think you just have to do that. You have to go in armed with that. And you can't, I think so many times, and once again, this is one of the things that's heartbreaking for me, is that patients will, they don't understand what you're saying, and they just nod their heads. And don't nod your head, because you don't nod your head. We're strong Black women. We don't nod our head when someone is saying something crazy about our grocery bill, about our water bill, a light bill. Nobody's doing any head nodding. No, we're not nodding like this. We're nodding like, no. And so, you're not rude or nasty. There's no need to curse anybody out, but say, you know what are the other options? This doesn't make sense to me. Share with me the other options. If someone says, well, that's it, there are no other options, then you may need to find another provider. And you don't hop around until you hear what you want to hear, but just become very informed and say, what about this option? I understand that there's this option. And a good provider may say, yes, that is an option, but the reason why it's not an option for you is because of this, this, and this. Or they may say, that is an option. It wasn't something I really thought about, but we can try it. And I think just being your own advocate for your health is so important. The CDC actually has a campaign called Hear Her, H-E-A-R, and it really kind of focuses more on the really maternal morbidity and mortality in African-American women is just so significant across the country. It's unacceptable. And a lot of it comes from really, when you read these stories of these women who have died or almost had these near misses, it's because someone wasn't listening to them. And so I think that should be, you take that in with every healthcare appointment you have. You make certain you are heard. We don't have a lot of time as physicians to talk to you. Honestly, that's just how it is. That's the fact of life. I mostly have an administrative position now, but as a clinician, you literally have 15, 20 minutes with your patient. And so, don't come in, I tell patients, don't come in and take the scenic route with your visit. Come in and say, this is what I have, this is what I need, these are my symptoms, this is the most important thing I need to get out of this visit today. And do that each and every time. And you will find that you will have a partner with your healthcare provider. And if you don't, then move on. You know, find someone that's a good fit for you.
That's awesome advice. We have a lot of really great questions from the audience, and I'm going to try to get through most of them. But this one is, are there any insights or tips that you can offer on how to start the family planning conversation?
I don't know if I have any tips, but it was just, it just kind of happened, you know? And it was like, I think we did get some of that pressure from the outside, like, hey, when are you guys gonna start? And I think I do remember telling my husband how that bothered me. And so that kind of started our conversation, probably. But I think just being honest, and with your partner, with your husband or significant other, however, just being honest, this is what I want. And so, you know how Dr. Wolf said, have the reproductive goal conversation with your doctor. You need to have that same conversation with your partner, your spouse, because as a man, sometimes they have more time. I don't know the history of it, but they have more time and we don't. And so they're like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Well, my time is running out, buddy. So we need to get this going. So just having the reproductive goals, I think that couples should have conversations often about their goals, their 1 month goal, 1 year goal, 5 year goal. And so having that conversation about what you want, your reproductive goal, and where that fits in on a consistent basis. So they may want to hold off, but you can't hold off. You may have to be the initiator of that conversation.
Great, thank you. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say I think that's a great point. And I think those, those plans and people not, I guess preparing for these types of conversations is because a lot of people aren't aware of the challenges that, that this really is, and they might not think that it's, as common as, women, go through it. So I think that that's a very good question that came on through the chat. And making awareness, and moving forward, having those conversations, because I don't think a lot of people are aware. People just think, well, you get married, you start to have, fun and you have kids, but it does not come that easy to everybody. So definitely great points, or Myesha, with making a plan.
That's great. Thank you, guys. And Myesha, you also mentioned that, men have longer in terms of their ability to produce. So this question is, what are some causes of male infertility?
I am going to gladly turn it over to Dr. Wolf, because I don't know. But Dr. Wolf will be able to answer that question for us.
Well, something like having mumps. So those are questions that we ask. So most of us are vaccinated against or immunized against measles, mumps, and rubella when we're younger. But if you weren't, if a male has mumps, that's one of the questions that we ask when a patient comes in. But a lot of times it's what we call we call it idiopathic. We just don't know. We used to say we're idiots. We just can't figure it out. So we call it idiopathic. But we just don't know. So almost up to 40% of infertility and couples' infertility could be due to the male. And so I think that's something very important to keep in mind. So there are a few things that we look at, and I'm not an infertility specialist, but as a generalist, these are things, if you want to do a semen analysis for your male partner, and so you want to make certain they have enough swimmers, so they have to have enough sperm. The sperm have to be shaped correctly, and that's called morphology. And they have to swim fast. So if they're not fast swimmers, if they're not shaped right, or if they're not enough, then all of that can contribute. And that's called male factor infertility. And so When you look at age for a man, we really don't start seeing infertility or issues with that from the male side, I think around age 80. So, yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
See, they have a lot longer.
A lot longer.
A lot longer.
Yeah. So here's a question. Do fibroids impact African-American Black women disproportionately? And if so, why?
I could take that, but hopefully everybody else, some other people will chime in on this. So we don't know why, actually, why fibroids impact women of color, African-American women. Anywhere when you look in the literature, anywhere between 50 and 80% of African-American women have some type of fibroid disease. And most of the time it's silent. It doesn't show itself. You may have tiny fibroids. Sometimes small fibroids inside of the uterus, inside of the lining of the uterus. The medical term for that is called submucosal fibroids. Those are huge culprits for infertility. And so what used to happen before we had really good ultrasound technology or imaging, your physician may do a pelvic exam for you and say, oh, I don't feel any fibroids. Your uterus feels normal size. Well, these fibroids are inside of the uterus. If you imagine the uterus, it's like a balloon, you blow it up. Normal size of the uterus is about the size of a pear, so the size of your fist. So if you have a small fibroid inside of your uterus, you won't feel that. But those fibroids can decrease fertility. And so since African-American women are disproportionately impacted by fibroid disease, it just stands to reason. And we know that these fibroids can be a culprit. And you remove those fibroids, you don't need a big surgery for these fibroids inside of the uterus called submucosal fibroids. It's an outpatient procedure that can be done in a surgery center or in the outpatient facility. You go home the same day. You use a device to either shave the fibroid off, or we call it hook it off. And then you'd be amazed that it's almost, your uterus is free of fibroid disease. So this is a simple procedure, not always offered to women. And just as a side note, before anyone says you need it, sometimes physicians, a lot of the old school physicians especially, will say, oh, you need a hysterectomy. Please don't go down that route until you're absolutely certain you don't want to have children and that is your only option. For some women, it is their only option, but for most women, it's not. So please don't go down that road, because that permanently removes that opportunity for you to have your baby yourself. It doesn't keep you from having a baby as long as your ovaries are intact. But if your reproductive goal is to have a baby, carry your baby yourself, and it's not detrimental to your health to do this, then please examine other options.
Okay. That's great. There are several other questions, and I want to try to get through them. And this one is for Ashley. And this question is, how has PCOS impacted your life, and how has it changed you?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. So, PCOS is a beast. It's just it's a beast. But it's a hormonal disorder. And you have a little cyst on your ovaries. And Dr. Wolf, please chime in. I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going off of what I've been through and what I've been educated with when I go to the doctor. But it in a way blocks ovulation. So you need to ovulate in order to have a child. And then also it could cause insulin resistance, where your body produces too much insulin, which drives hunger, which you eat more, which causes you to gain weight. And it also can cause high blood pressure and a couple of other things. And one of the things for PCOS, to, I guess, kind of relieve some of these, symptoms, I guess, to get you to be fertile is to lose weight. So I'm like, how do you lose weight if you got insulin resistant and you're eating this and you're gaining weight, and they want to put you on birth control because your periods are, it's a mess. But I will say, eating, what has changed, you know, in my life is definitely a healthier diet. But I don't want to just throw healthy diet out there because everybody is different. And when it comes down to PCOS, I would really say reach out to your physician or a nutritionist and have them work with you with a plan, because, you know, that different foods and, you know, your body, it all kind of is different for everybody. So I would definitely say physically active is definitely important, and your diet. So that's the my take on how I've been affected by PCOS and what has helped me along the way. So thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. And another question is, are there long-term effects of using birth control for many years, especially around conceiving once a woman decides to get off birth control?
That may be for me, huh?
The medical expert in the room. So.
You know, so years ago, birth control pills used to be at a much higher dose than what they are now. So if you look at your pill pack, some pill packs will say 10 micrograms. And this is the estrogen amount. So 10 micrograms, 20 micrograms, 25 micrograms, 35 micrograms. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the pills were 100 micrograms of estrogen, which is a lot of estrogen. So women were told, oh, you should not take birth control pills after, age 35. There are a lot of risk associated with these very high doses of birth control pills. But now we use actually birth control pills for a lot of different things, and it's been alluded to in this conversation as well, to help regulate your menstrual cycles. If you're having heavy bleeding, it regulates your menstrual cycles like clockwork for some women. There's some women who actually use it for birth control, but you don't need that pill holiday, as we used to call it. Really what birth control pills do is they trick your body into thinking that it's pregnant, and it's not. So it actually has a protective effect. The thought is that it has a protective effect on your ovaries, and so that you don't ovulate. And so if you don't ovulate, actually, you're decreasing your risk. And there's a theory that you're decreasing your risk for ovarian cancer because you're not actually expelling an egg. You're not causing a scar to form on your ovary, which happens. And I don't want anybody to freak out. Oh, I don't need to ovulate because I'm going to get ovarian cancer. No, that's not the case. But this is just one of the theories of birth control. And so I'm saying all that to say that what used to be true probably 30, 40 years ago is no longer true. We have patients taking birth control pills in their 50s. They're all low, very low dose, as long as you don't have any predisposing health factors that should keep you from taking birth control. Hypertension would be one of them. Smoking would be another.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Here's a question. In Myesha and Kinetra, can you two answer this question? How does infertility affect relationships and marriages? And what advice would you give to couples to help them through this experience?
I'll go first, Kinetra, if you don't mind, Silver. For me and my relationship, wow, that's a really good question. It brought my husband and I closer together because he wanted to make everything okay, and so his way of doing that was to walk with me along the way. He went to every doctor's appointment. This is before pregnancy, so you're at the doctor a lot with in vitro fertilization, with IVF, and so he went to every doctor's appointment. And I can remember one appointment he didn't go to, and I had to purchase the medicine that day. And I didn't know how much the medicine cost. And I was there in tears. And the pharmacists were very, you get to know people because you're there a lot, right? But the pharmacists were like, wow, take your time, write your check out though. But he was just very supportive and he was always there. And I really think that it allowed us to have that time, almost that time to just say, what if, and this is how it's going to be. And, think about our goals and our future. Because again, you remember I said we were settled, like it was a known fact, however it was going to be, however we were going to become parents. We were just preparing to become parents. So for us, it was a very together experience. I can say for a lot of couples that I've talked to that is not the case, where it becomes very combative and very isolating, and the woman is doing all this and she's, so for me and mine, it was a very close relationship and a very spiritual journey, to be honest. It was really nice. So hope that answers.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
So I'd like to just echo what Myesha said. I think because my husband and I married at a much later age, I think that had a lot to do with it. You talk about finances, you talk about credit, you talk about all of these different things, but we were fortunate enough to be as proactive as we could as it related to just starting a family. So we had those conversations. Like I said, there was a medical condition that his family had, or some traits, and we got that checked out even before we were married. So I think communication, of course, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's very important that you sit down and you talk about not just the beautiful ending that we all want to see, but also what if, like, what if this doesn't work? What if something happens and God doesn't intend for us to be parents? What if he has a different plan on our lives? And so I think just being able to commit to that prior to, I think it's very important. And just continuing to have that foundation. Faith has always been our foundation individually. And so it was even stronger as a couple. So that's the advice I would give anyone, whether they're married now or they're thinking about getting married, is have those conversations, because it will save you a lot of heartache, and it'll just be a lot better if you have to be faced with something like that.
That's great. And as we finish up, a couple of other questions, if you all have resources that you can type in the chat box for the audience, that would be great. Any resources that that you would feel would be beneficial to the audience. And you guys shared some of them, and some of the ones that you've shared, if you can put it in the chat box, and any others that you may want to add would be great. And Dr. Wolf, I think that these questions are more for you, and I just want to ask them because I think they're great questions and important ones. But this one is: frozen eggs do not last indefinitely, and how long should families expect them to be viable? And also, what about embryos?
You know what? That's a tough question, and probably I don't have a good answer for that. You can actually your eggs and embryos can be frozen for years, though. It can be 15, 20 years. One of the things that we've seen now is that young women who unfortunately are diagnosed with cancer early on actually have a procedure called fertility preservation. And so they actually if they're able to, they actually have their eggs removed prior to having chemotherapy or maybe surgery to actually remove their ovaries to cure their cancer. And so I don't know how long, I don't know whether it's 50 years or 60 years, but it is a long time. It's several years. So that's why you can, go through a freeze egg cycle in your 30s and you're not planning to use your eggs maybe until you're 40.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then this one is: can you address how the term geriatric pregnancy causes unnecessary stress and anxiety? And what is a better term that can be used for pregnancy later in life?
Yeah, I mean, we don't use that term anymore. I've
never heard it.
I was like, oh, we don't use that term anymore. And that's definitely we'll use the term advanced maternal age, which is basically over age 35. And really it's not necessarily to say you're high risk, but it just allows us, we look at things through a different lens. And I always tell my patients, all babies are premium. But if you have a patient that comes in and she's 45 and this is her baby, it's a premium baby. And so we just look, the things that can impact the patient at that age, hypertension, diabetes, are more prevalent. We're going to look at it through a different lens. We're definitely want to make certain that you're not missing anything. So yeah, geriatric pregnancy, we don't use that. That's hurtful and just developed by probably old white man. So we don't use those. I know I'm being recorded, but we just don't use those anymore.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, though. And this one is that there is an increase in reproductive disorders among younger women of color. And any thoughts or insights around that increase in reproductive disorders?
I'm not certain what the term reproductive disorders means. Is it maybe related to reproductive?
PCOS,
okay.
etc.
I think, it's there. It's always been there. But as I mentioned earlier, endometriosis was thought to be a disease of white women in their late 20s, early 30s, who had no children. This was literally what we were taught. And so I've seen endometriosis in teenagers and African-American women. And so we're better able to diagnose it. There's the culture is changing so that we're recognizing that African-American women, yes, they can have endometriosis just like everybody else. It impacts our fertility. So we're getting better at diagnosing that and looking for it. As I said, our lens has been adjusted now, has been readjusted. And so it's more so probably just diagnosing this and more information, I think, as opposed to it becoming more common, because it's been there. I've been in practice for almost 25 years, and I have not felt that is increasing. It's always been there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our president, Mia Gutridge, who's going to close us out, and then we're going to have prayer by our chaplain. Before doing so, I just want to thank the panelists again, thank our sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, and the planners of the event, and all of you again for being here. And I just want to encourage continuous conversations to build awareness and provide resources and to love on each other, to know that you're not alone in this journey. And I believe someone wrote in a quote in their bio from Maya Angelou that it's important to do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, you do better. So we now know that infertility is a serious issue among Black women. Therefore, we must do better to support them in our community. And I'd like to also read a statement from an audience member that states, I appreciate each of you women and your stories, testimonies that you shared tonight. My husband and I are in the process of trying to have a baby, but you ladies have opened my eyes to some of these, and I definitely have to make change. I have never received talk like this before. Thank you. And so with that, I invite our president, Myesha Gutridge, to close us out, and then following her will be a closing prayer by our chaplain, Ernestine Tolbert. Thank you guys again.
Wow, what a great conversation. These ladies have poured out their hearts. They have shared their personal journey with all of us. It's not easy to get in front of a community, not knowing who's on the other side, and listening to my personal, intimate story. And I just applaud you ladies for opening up your journey with us and the community. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I applaud you all for making it easy. Your stories were beautiful. The issues that you are having or had that you overcome and still overcoming is just beautiful. Now the our attendees, they gave you a lot of nuggets. They poured out their hearts, including Dr. Wolf. Advocate for yourself. Speak for yourself. Do your research. Ask the questions. Know your medical history. Know the medical history of your partner. Know your family's medical history. You know, as African Americans, we don't talk about things like that. Oh, that's a hush hush. Later on in life, you know that your three-person removed great grandmother had hypertension, and it skipped a generation, and now it's hitting you, and you don't understand why. Talk. You hear me? Talk. Open up your mouths, ask the questions, have the conversation. It's okay. It's okay to have these conversations. Do not be embarrassed. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Pray. Pray always. You have the information. Now we have to do better. Don't sit on this information. Take action. This is why we decided to have this discussion on infertility in the women of color, because we tend to be shy and don't want anybody in our business. It's no longer about us anymore. It's about us sharing our testimony because we have already gone through the test. Someone needs to hear the story, and I'm hoping that the people that attended heard the story. Now they can start penning their journey, asking the questions, looking at all of the resources, and getting more resources. When you overcome, then you share your story. Your journey is not for you, it's for someone else. Thank you. And thank you, Sora Greene, for hosting. You did a marvelous job. Beautiful. You kept the conversation going. I'm just ecstatic. And thank you, Physical Mental Health Committee, for coming up with this theme and this conversation that some people look at as being taboo. Thank you all for your questions. They were wonderful questions. Open up our hearts and our eyes to answer them and to gain more insight. I thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Stay tuned. We're going to have more conversations similar to this. May not be on this topic. It may be on another topic that may be considered taboo or not. But just stay tuned. We are planning. Have a wonderful evening.
It has just been so enlightening just to hear the panelists speak tonight. We know that a lot of times we do not want to share, but in our sharing, it helps others. And we have been there, a lot of us, and others can be helped through us. I'm going to just think in your mind, what is your most memorable invitation? All of us have received an invitation, either for a baby shower, a wedding, a big party. But when we receive that invitation, we have to wait for the time to get to that or go to that party or wait for the baby to be born or wait for the wedding. Waiting is the hard part. And in all of our panelists, we saw tonight that they had to wait. They prayed, they did different things, but it was not in their timing. It was God's timing. This is a time we sometimes feel discouraged. We sometimes feel that it's wasted, but it is not wasted. God is growing us. And as Myesha said, in that waiting, in that time, that all of the time that they went through their struggles and went through whatever she had to go to, when that boy came, he was perfect. And that's what waiting does for us. We wait, but when in God's time, it is perfect because it is his time and not our time. The godness of God is never diluted in our waiting, and neither is his call on our life watered down when he doesn't answer us quickly. So we have to trust God, keep the faith, and know that in waiting on God, we have perfectness in him. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you for this opportunity as we as Deltas has come and we have made ourselves transparent, Lord. We know that through our struggles and through our experience, we can help others. And that is what we as Deltas want to do. We want to help others. We want to bring others through what we have gone through in order to lift them up. Dear God, we just thank you for the panelists that has been transparent. Continue to bless them and keep them to know that you have done what you was to do. You had a plan for their lives and it is done. We thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to come to do a program like this. We love you and we know that whatever we ask is already done. In your name, we ask all of these things in your precious name. Amen.